So you have all have had circulation of the agenda and some additional documents. The agenda that was originally circulated had a number of other items, but due to time pressure, Sammy had decided to remove a number of those. So as you will see on the screen, he has removed the recruitment of affiliated members, support to the website development, overseeing the progress of implementation of initiatives, GForce executive secretaries. And so for our agenda today, we will just agree to the agenda in a moment. We will have an introduction to the GForce projects in 2020. This is really an update on the initiatives that are ongoing or about to begin. Greg, I might just check with you before we agree to, Sammy had mentioned that he was unsure as to whether or not we would get time to discuss the budget. I don't know if you've had a discussion with him since in relation to that.
We haven't really made a substantial change to the budget since the last meeting, so I don't think there's value in that today.
Okay, so we will possibly not speak about the budget unless people have specific questions, maybe, and maybe you can answer those if they do, Greg. That would be very helpful. So we will then, having looked at the projects that are ongoing in 2021 or about to begin, we'll then move on to a discussion regarding the conditions of remuneration of members and our board of directors in carrying out GForce business. And there's a document attached to this agenda item. And then finally, we have the proposed business model for e-learning activity delivery. And again, that's something that has been selected, or sorry, has been provided in advance of the meeting. So hopefully you've had a chance to read those three documents because they will be the basis of our discussion during the course of the meeting. So is everybody happy to accept this agenda?
Yes.
And so just in the interest of transparency and information, there was a meeting of the executive board yesterday where we discussed these documents and had some suggested changes that we would think would be useful to make to those documents, and we'll share those with you during the course of the discussion. So if everybody is happy to move on, please feel free to just either raise your hand or turn on your microphone and I can see you or wave at me to let me know that you want to jump into the conversation. So, but before I move off the first item, can somebody remind me, maybe Greg, do we need a proposer and seconder for the agenda?
I think we have been using that practice, yes.
Yeah, okay. So can I have a proposer for the revised agenda?
I propose to adopt the agenda with the deletion of the budgetary item.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
A second.
Oh, thank you, Joyce. Okay, that's wonderful. So if we move on then to the second item on the agenda, which is the introduction of the GForce projects in 2021. The document for this item is the document entitled Update on GForce Initiatives, and there is two initiatives. One is in relation to the Codex Initiative for Middle East and North Africa, the MENA Codex Initiative, and the second one is in relation to the laboratory capacity building in East Africa community. So before we jump into the discussion and hear from you as to your views or any suggested changes or comments you'd like to make, perhaps Joyce, you would let us know if there were any issues. I don't believe there were any changes suggested yesterday to the documents.
Yes, excuse me, I was disconnected. For this section, we didn't have any changes.
Okay, thank you. So the document that we will discuss has not been altered since the discussion at the executive board yesterday. Maybe I can just give you an overview of the discussion of the executive board, and perhaps then maybe Greg and Joyce, you could add in any additional comments or issues that I didn't recall correctly or at all from our discussion yesterday. So with respect to the first initiative, this is an initiative that has already been seen by you. We have discussed this at a previous meeting. And this particular initiative is in progress and it is working well. As I understand it from our discussions yesterday, it is obviously quite busy. It in fact is one of the initiatives that has meant Sammy is not able to join us today. So he is actually actively participating in a group, a workshop discussion on this particular initiative as we speak. That is really all in relation to this. So you have seen this already, and it's just really to give you an update on where things are at. So does anybody have anything they wish to say? Maybe Greg and Joyce, if you could just confirm my recollection of the discussion yesterday in relation to this particular initiative.
Yes, I think that's fair. We didn't discuss the content of this work in any detail, but with respect to the later agenda items, this activity and the laboratory capacity building project triggers the need for us to contemplate how we will pay experts and also how we will do cost and revenue sharing with for e-learning activities. So these projects are almost a case study in what we need to develop to understand how different activities will be funded and how our partners will be compensated.
Thanks for that, Greg. So as Greg said and confirmed, we didn't change any of the content. It was merely for information purposes. However, one of the issues that we did discuss at the executive board meeting yesterday was whether or not we as a board needed to vote on these initiatives. So there was a discussion yesterday. Sammy was hoping for a vote at this board meeting with respect to these two initiatives, i.e. that the board would approve these initiatives to go ahead through the GFoRSS organization in the way in which they have been presented and discussed previously or are presented now. The discussion we had yesterday was very much around, do they need to be voted on by the board? And if they do, can they proceed even if they haven't been voted on? And the other question we had was, well, what criteria, do we need, maybe let me just rephrase. The question was, does every initiative that GFoRSS gets involved in have to be voted off by the board? Or is there a set of criteria that we could think about using that would allow Sammy and the organization to go across to proceed with initiatives in the absence of a vote for the board? So the discussion yesterday was very much maybe at the beginning, because we are just learning about the initiatives that we will be involved in and that will be supported. It may very well be useful for the board to vote on initiatives, but it may be that over time we might not have to vote on every initiative. And if we were not to vote on every initiative, what might be the criteria that we could use to determine whether or not an initiative requires a vote or not? So it's really over to you to comment and for discussion.
I have a few suggestions that we could maybe take note of, although I don't think we should proceed to any sort of decision. One would be simply the criteria of novelty, whether it's a new activity that hasn't been conducted before, or it's a new region of the world that we have not done work for, or it is a new partner in terms of a substantive organization that we're partnering with to deliver a certain activity. I think in the early days, just about every project is going to satisfy one of those criteria, but eventually we will be in a position where we're repeating the laboratory capacity building in the East Africa community, but now we're doing it in the West African community, and I don't think we'll need a board decision to repeat a course that we've already given. So that's kind of my thinking along those lines.
Thanks for that, Greg. Others, do you have some views that you'd like to share? Go ahead, Zainab, and then we'll go to Janji.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Concerning the both initiatives, so Sam gave me an overview about the first one concerning Codex, but the second one concerning laboratory health. Can anyone give us an overview about activities, what is scheduled for the next steps, and what we have to do as members of the board? And the third question, can there are only 2 initiatives, or we can also propose if there's some initiative more? Thank you.
Thanks, Zainab. So in relation to the second laboratory capacity building initiative, what I can tell you is that already there is an e-learning program on the GForce learning platform, which has content already developed across a number of modules. And I believe some of these modules have already been given or are in the process of being scheduled. I do believe that the last one, if I recall correctly, Greg and Joyce, is going to be delivered in August of this year. So we currently have a number of participants, and just let me see if I can get the number. I can't recall the exact number of participants on the laboratory capacity building initiative, but it is a 4-month course, as it says. The content has been developed based on a program that has already been developed by Herrera, University of Laval, and Samuel's team, in which I believe 29 countries were involved with 80 participants. So Samuel has taken that program and adapted it specifically to meet the needs of the East African community. And I believe he has a number of participants on the course registered and currently are learning. And if I recall correctly, as I said, I believe that the final module will be delivered at the end of August. Maybe Greg or Joyce, do you recall anything else?
Yes, Pam, thank you. I wanted to give the full board like a small idea about what we discussed yesterday, like summary about the 2 initiatives. The first initiative related to Codex will be a subcontract with Université Laval. Because the main deliverer of this initiative will be the platform of risk analysis at Université Laval. Regarding the second initiative, this is it will be a part of the program of laboratory capacity building in its first online part. And the GForce is directly invoicing to the implementer of the initiative, the entity that is delivering the program directly in East Africa. So this was the clarification I wanted to give.
Thank you, Joyce. Greg, would you have anything to add before I move on to Professor Chen?
No, I think that's a fairly complete story.
Okay, thank you. And Zainab, I will answer your second question in a moment in relation to other ideas from the board. Professor Chen, over to you.
My simple comment is I fully agree with what Greg said. I think it's very clear. My idea is as a board, we don't want to put too much work on ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that was the essence of the discussion yesterday. It was going to be a lot of administration, I believe. I think we should be focusing our discussions on the board at more strategic initiatives and thinking about the future rather than the current. And as Greg suggested, which I think is a really great idea, where a project brings novelty or has that element of novelty, we can apply. And as you said, Greg, and we said yesterday, that would be nearly all of the projects for the first period of time. So we get used to the types of projects and initiatives that we're involved in. And we can then, over time, we don't have to go back. We can just say this is very similar to the laboratory capacity building in East Africa Community Initiative. So in relation, Zainab, to the board bringing through other initiatives, I don't believe there's anything that prevents us from doing so, but I can't comment. It's not something I discussed or we discussed yesterday, but I think Sami would like for the board members to contribute to the future initiatives. So if you have some ideas, I think it would be really interesting to hear them. And perhaps maybe we can develop a process, a very simple process. If somebody from the board wishes to propose an initiative, then maybe a very short description of that initiative in advance of the board meeting so that board members can think about it and reflect on it in advance to be ready to discuss at the board. But Zainab, do you have an idea for an initiative?
For me?
Yeah. You asked the question, so I'm assuming that maybe you have some ideas.
Yeah, I was thinking about reglementation. Maybe it will not be an initiative, but we have to think about everything concerning reglementation and legislation, because it's the basis of our work, and we have different reglementations. So we can maybe we can constitute a small group for thinking about all legislation on food safety. Because I believe we have not the same reglementation at all in our countries. Reglementation in North Africa is not the same in others country. It's not the same at all in Ireland. So maybe we can share our legislation and see how we can improve it.
Yes, and thank you for that. Do others have some reaction that they'd like to share to that idea? Nuri, please.
Yes, thank you, Pam. Yes, I think that the idea of Zainab, it's very good about to share the legislation, because as for instance, for Latin America, we are exporting country, and sometimes it's difficult to know about the legislation of the other countries. We know, of course, from European Community, from United States, but from other countries it's not so easy. For instance, from India or from Africa countries. Then I think that is a very good idea.
Thank you, Nuri.
I'm sorry, Pam, and to add something else. And also, when I listen about this capacity building for laboratories, I think that in the future, a topic that is could be very interesting, it's to share experience of developing countries with curves in food fraud, for instance.
And I'm back. Sorry.
Oh, hello, Sami.
Apologies for interrupting. So happy to be back with you.
No problem.
Yes, we just finished. Sorry.
So Sami, in your absence, we have agreed that you are going to do an awful lot more work because you're not doing enough, You have been nominated as the person to do all of the work along with your team. We're just going to sit there and support you and say this is a really good idea. So this is what happens when you are late for a meeting. You get all of the work when you come back.
happy to take that on, but I'm really counting on you a lot though, so I have to admit, you know.
So maybe let me bring you up to speed, Sammy, and where we're at. So we're just on the initiatives. We've just provided through myself and Joyce and Greg a little bit of an update insofar as we have the information in relation to these two initiatives. I think generally we started to capture some ideas in relation to that question we had with respect to whether or not every initiative requires a vote at the board. And the general consensus, I think, is that no, everything shouldn't need to be voted by the board before it can proceed or progress. However, in the early days, it would probably be very useful that all of the initiatives, that the board was aware of all of the initiatives and that they were in a position to understand what that might mean from a resources perspective, but equally, its alignment with the GFoRSS principles and objectives. Greg had suggested, and others agreed, that it would be good to put in place some criteria. One suggested criteria, which I think is generally agreed, is around the criteria of novelty. So if the initiative is a new region, if it's something that's not done before by GFoRSS, or there's a new partner, well, these could be the novelty elements. So effectively, that would mean that in the early days, all projects or all initiatives would meet this novelty criteria and therefore would come to the board for discussion and a vote. But that over time, the novelty would reduce because we would be on hopefully a repeat of the model or a refinement of a previous initiative. And that's just one suggestion of a novelty, which I think novelty as a criteria, which I think, and there may be others, and perhaps maybe the idea going forward is that we would use that criteria of novelty, so everything will come to the board. But in our discussions, we might identify other criteria that we could use then to determine what might need to come to the board in the future. Professor Chen obviously supported that as well. I'm very much of the view, and I would agree that the board should not be spending its time voting on initiatives. It should be spending its time discussing more strategic issues. Zainab asked the question in relation to, can the board bring forward its own ideas for initiatives? And I answered that I think that would be expected and very useful. One of the ideas that Zainab had was around the implementation of legislation. So generally, the differences in how we implement the legislation is different in different countries and jurisdictions, and that possibly a small group of the board or with others might review that as an opportunity for an initiative in the future. Others agreed with that, and in addition then, just as you joined us, Nuri had suggested another idea, which is around sharing experiences of developing countries in the area of food fraud. So this was another idea put forward. So I think generally the discussion was very supportive of the initiatives. Any new initiative needs to come to the board, and then I think we probably now you're starting to see, and I believe, an appetite within board members to think about, well, what next? And obviously the other question is then, if these are our ideas, who is looking for them, but who also is going to fund them? Yes. Which I think would lead us nicely into the next item on the agenda in the interest of time. However, before we leave this particular item, I just want to know, Sammy, if you wanted to add anything to that or comment, and then maybe if any other comments from board members, please feel free to share.
No, well, thank you very much actually for bringing me up to speed, Pam, and I'm very much actually in line with most of the comments that were made. I guess maybe one last point that I would bring is that if there are in fact recommendations from the board for areas of or directions of investment that our organization should be going towards, of course, I mean, right now we are driven by funding that is available, but as an organization we want to be strategic and we want to actually try to find funding for areas that we think are important as well. So perhaps there might be also discussions that could be held in order to prioritize those areas that the board has identified as warranting investment, and then it would be up to us at the management level, but also again with the contribution of the board to really brainstorm how to find the funds. If we deem these initiatives or these areas of investment important, really to look for the funding that would allow us to implement them. And that would be also, I think that would be in fact a more strategic way of organizing our business as opposed to simply going after the funds. We needed to kickstart somewhere, and that's why we went after what was available. But hopefully more and more we will get more strategic in what we want to accomplish. So thank you for that.
Thanks for that, Sami. And yeah, I think it's trying to find the balance initially. Let's start and see where we go and what kind of funds we can get and what kind of experience we can have and what initiatives we can roll out. And when things become a little bit more on a repeat basis, then we can think about what might be the priority areas. But we now have two priority areas that have been identified by the board, and perhaps maybe a suggestion from me would be at the next board meeting or at some point we might just take a little bit of time to brainstorm. So part of our board meeting might be a little brainstorming session around what are the areas that we're interested in, and that we think GFoRSS would be a good mechanism to progress those ideas. If everybody is okay, then we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Yeah, okay, thank you. And thank you for that discussion. So the next item on the agenda is in relation to the conditions of remuneration of members and our board of directors in carrying out the GFoRSS business. So the document that you have is this one, which is entitled Proposed Consulting Fee Structure. And we discussed this at executive board meeting yesterday, and some of the areas we discussed were in relation to and some revisions we suggested was particularly in relation to this word experience and what constitutes experience. So perhaps a CV of an expert would be a good way to determine experience, because the question I had, and I used myself as an example, was do I represent senior level experience? Yes, in one area, but maybe not in every area. So it was just really to get an understanding of what kind of experience and what do we mean by the word experience. And the other area that I can recall is we had a discussion, well, two items in relation to fees. One was in relation to the level of the fee, and the second was in relation to whether this should be Canadian dollars or whether it should be US dollars. So I'm going to hand over quickly to Joyce just to maybe provide additional information if you have it, or if you have some other comments, Joyce, as well in relation to the discussion we had yesterday.
Thank you, Pam. I will tell you what we agreed on yesterday for the changes. First, that the CV will be judged by if the candidate will be considered as senior or junior, will be judged by the expert CV in association with the mission, and a section was added to the document mentioning the CV evaluation. And the second thing is it was agreed to revert the fee to US dollars.
Thanks, Joyce. For that clarification. So it's really over to board members, unless Sami, you want to provide any further information over and above what's in the document.
Yeah. I guess maybe emphasizing a point, thank you, Pam, that we discussed also yesterday, and I think it was you and or Greg that brought this forward, which is essentially how these numbers would compare on the marketplace. And, you know, we've identified that, in fact, these numbers would be considered within really the lower tier of the marketplace. But at the same time, that we would be emphasizing the notion that, you know, those who would be contributing in programs such as the ones that would be delivered by GForce would be also considering that they are participating towards a public good, and that as a result, in fact, you know, there is a level of acknowledgement that while again remuneration is part of a fairness, you know, that needs to be observed, you know, to you know, compensate for effort and for expertise being provided, but at the same time there is that level of you know, investment or contribution towards a public good. So by bringing, I think, the numbers towards the USD value, like putting the USD value, we would in fact increase, because generally the Canadian dollars, as I mentioned, in fact, yesterday, I think there are maybe 2 or 3 instances in history where the Canadian dollar was higher than the US dollar, but it didn't last very long. I mean, I know that I lived a period of that for a year and a half maximum. In fact, it was at parity or at 1.1. But generally the Canadian dollar is lower. So by bringing numbers in USD, not only are we in line with international organizations, with also levels that are known internationally, but also we would increase the competitiveness of the offer.
Joyce, go ahead. Thanks, Sami.
Yes, Sami, I please need a clarification because it wasn't clear for me from yesterday. So we will keep the same amount, but we will change it to US dollars, or we will convert the...
No, we will keep the same amount, but it will be in US dollars. So essentially, in fact, we're increasing the rate. That's what we are doing. By doing that, in nature, the consequence is that the rate will be higher, in fact.
Okay, thank you.
Greg, thank you, Joyce.
Yes, I just wanted to suggest that we might want to put a nominal value, like, for example, $500 US a day here, and maybe as a second addition would be to allow for another tier for when it's much more than 5 days. This is sort of the notion of a bulk purchase of someone's time. Just so that we can accommodate that if you were going to give someone an entire year's worth of work, you would want to negotiate a much lower rate with them, perhaps. The other thing I wanted to suggest is that we should perhaps indicate that the nominal value, what might be $500 US per day, but the actual value may be in the currency of the funding agency. So whatever the funding agency's currency is, could be the actual payment currency, so that the GForce doesn't run any exchange rate risk. So that would be my, that's my treasurer's hat on for the moment. And the other thing we may want to accommodate is that the negotiation with the experts could be on a per day basis, but the actual contractual arrangement could be converted to a firm fixed price, so that we can budget that this will be approximate. Let's say someone's going to do 5 days of training, and we agree that there's probably 3 days of preparation and 5 days of delivery, and that therefore is 8 days times $500 is $4,000 US, and we convert that to a firm fixed price. And the reason is we don't want someone coming back saying, well, the delivery actually took me 10 days, or sorry, the preparation took me 5 days, and therefore I want more money than we originally budgeted. So I think even though the per day basis is a good way of having a conversation, we will in many cases want to convert it into a firm fixed price contract, if that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah. That makes really good sense, actually, because you could find yourself very quickly in a situation where the costs rack up as a project is already in progress, because somebody may or an expert may wish to extend the number of preparation days, which is very difficult in some respects to verify and validate, particularly when we're not all in one organization. So
it's also a great way to ruin a relationship with old friends that you've worked with for many years, and you end up with a fight over exactly how much time they spent in it and how fruitfully they spent it.
Yes, and even though it is a global community, it is a small community. And we would all hope to remain friends for a very, 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 very long time. Okay, Sam, you've got a thumbs up. I'm assuming, yeah, you're nodding in agreement. Do others have any comments they wish to offer on this particular agenda item? No. So we've agreed that we will provide the additional information in relation to experience. We've agreed to change it to US dollars at the same amount. We have, I think, Sammy, you might just want to include then two additional elements. One is in relation to the bulk purchase idea, suggestion of Greg, and then in relation to the actual contract of a firm fixed price. I leave it to you and Greg to figure out how you might word that in the document, if that's okay.
Sure, Pam, if I may. So definitely we'll make those adjustments. I mean, right now, in fact, we do have a provision that accounts for missions above 5 days, but I do take, Greg's point about needing to convert that into a fixed price once an agreement on the effort about the mission has been identified and agreed to. And we'll put some wording that hopefully we'll work on together to include that. I'm just now wondering if we need to take a motion to at least vote. I know that you don't have the final document in front of you, but at least if we can get the vote on the principle of at least the values that are listed here, with the caveats of the the amendments that we will make, in particular in relation with the experience, but also in the expression of the bulk value where needed.
Okay, so with those amendments, is the board happy to vote to agree to this document then becoming the basis upon which we set the fee structure?
I agree.
Thank you, Joyce.
Can I propose two minor amendments? One is just that we acknowledge in the document that this would be reviewed annually. Or as frequently as necessary if we find that these are not meeting the market demand and we can't recruit experts on this basis, or for any other reason, we would review it. The second thing I wanted to indicate is that we would probably need to have a policy that the organization has to reserve the right to pay the clients, to pay their service providers only after they've received funding, only after GFoRSS has received funding. We simply don't have the kind of cash account that we can to offer payment in advance before we get paid. So the experts would have to agree that they will not be paid until GFoRSS has been paid for the service from the primary funder, so that we're not operating as a bank for people's cash flow. Okay,
that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm just looking to the board to see if you agree. So subject to those minor amendments, subject to those additions we agreed, is the board then happy to agree to this becoming the consulting fee structure to support GFoRSS operations? And Joyce has already indicated that she is supportive. I'm supportive. Sam, Greg, and then Junshi is also supportive. And so I take it then that we can, and Zainab, and we can take it then that is passed, that this now becomes the official fee structure, subject to the amendment, Sammy, and you might just circulate the document. And I would ask that when you circulate it, that you then ask for people to respond positively, or respond a reply to your email indicating their agreement. I think you will have to get at least a quorum of members saying yes, just so for the records.
Yes, and if I may, actually, Pam, just for the documentation, I mean, I've heard those who support it. I'm just going to put on the spot WM and Nuri, because we haven't heard from you, just to hear if you have reservations, if you want to abstain, or if you are supportive.
I agree, Sammy. It's okay for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I agree completely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that, Pam. I just wanted to document the for those who are attending. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here, Sammy. You wrote the bylaws. We all agreed with them, but you now know them better than all of us. So I want to make sure that we stick to them. Okay, if we then move on to the final item on our agenda, which is this document that you had been circulated, proposed business model for delivery of the e-learning initiatives. What's this doing? Okay, well, you have the document in advance and you can see it then on the screen. So we had some discussion on this yesterday at the executive board meeting. I believe we did agree to making some changes to this, or at least clarifications, but actually my memory is now failing me miserably as to what it is we said we might change. So maybe perhaps Sammy or Joyce, who took the minutes, maybe you can just remind us. Thank you.
Yeah, we had to add a section regarding that, based on the experience, that this is an approval of this time and will be subject to review based on the experience that will be gained through the delivery model regarding the system, the distance learning system. So we had to put this claim, this statement, we should add it to the document.
Thanks, Joyce. Samuel?
Well, it's very much that it's the periodic review, but also that the proposed distribution of available revenue was based on experience from other organizations as well. So essentially also to identify the non-arbitrary nature of the proposal that we are coming up with at this stage.
Thanks, Sammy. Can I just ask board members if you understand the proposed business model? Would you like Sammy to walk you through what the model is, or is it self-explanatory? I know it was useful for me yesterday when Samuel walked us through the model. Maybe if others would like that as well.
I think the one thing that may be worth explaining is the concept of direct costs.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to walk you through it as briefly as I can, because I see that the time is moving really quickly. So essentially, the model is really based on the identification of there is a revenue that will be obtained by GFoRSS as a result of the delivery of an e-learning initiative. And we're also starting from the principle that GFoRSS is not necessarily the owner of the material, and it might be material that is developed by a third party, either another regulatory organization, an academic center, another party that is providing us with the content. So obviously, GFoRSS is in fact going to be delivering this through its own portal, an e-learning portal that we in fact acquired and we pay for. So as a result, in fact, there are management fees that are fully justified. The administration of those who register, a number of administrative functions that would essentially justify the taking of that 10%. So that 10% is applied to to the revenue value. The direct costs are essentially those that are related to GForce paying somebody or something that will contribute in the delivery. And the example is, for example, in the context of delivering even an e-learning program, there might be the need to rely upon an instructor that is hired in order to accompany the delivery period with answering questions from the learners, from the candidates, for the organization of some virtual sessions when these are warranted. So essentially, there are some direct costs that are associated with that. The direct costs could be also considered for tailoring material that was obtained from somebody else in order to meet an objective and in order to meet a demand from a client that is willing to pay for that particular training or to obtain that training. So those will be subtracted directly from the revenue value and from the management fee, that was already taken out, and that would lead us to what we call an available revenue, and that's essentially, I would say, the disposable income amount that will be subject to distribution, and where that percentage distribution is applied. The percentage distribution is applied considering that the owner gets most of the credit, if you will, from this. So essentially, they would get 80% of that disposable income, and GForce would get 20% so that it can also continue to invest in areas of development of food regulatory science learning.
Thank you, Sami. Is that clear? Nuri, Wiem, Zainab?
Yes.
Okay. Wiem?
So this one, also to go again with the caveats that were mentioned. So the periodic review nature of this. So we will examine this as we implement it, and we will review it on a periodic basis.
Okay, so I think in the I think you've got agreement, Sami, that this then becomes the business model for delivery of the e-learning initiatives, and I think subject to those additions that you spoke about, the approval and then the review clause, then I think then we could take this as agreed.
And so we take it as this is a unanimous vote, right? I just want to make sure that there is nobody abstaining and nobody opposing.
Yeah, the only person I can't see at the moment on screen is Professor Chen. So perhaps you might give us a thumbs up, Professor Chen. He seems like he's still on the call, but I can't see him. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounded like he had to take a phone call by.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We'll verify maybe electronically that there is no opposition there. So.
Yeah.
I offer to propose a few alternates for future discussion. The variations that I'm interested in are whether or not GForce is the initiator of the activity and is ultimately paying for the training materials to be prepared, and therefore becomes the owner of the training material as part of the same engagement. And therefore, the entire all of the costs associated with the person preparing and possibly delivering the training would be embedded in the M equation, part of the equation here, and then 100% of the disposable revenue would stay with GForce. I think that's just a minor variation that's worth making explicit. The other thing might be to have a variation on this, which accommodates a variable income stream where you don't know at the onset exactly how many participants you'll have. And so there might be an arrangement for a minimal cost to the training material owner. The benefit of that is that we would have the benefit of a substantial course. You anticipated only 20, and all of that upside would stay with GForce. And the training material owner would have a fixed cost for their contribution, but the variable upside would go to GForce, if that makes sense.
Well, that part I would like maybe, I'm sorry, maybe to understand this, the last example more, Greg. So can you just elaborate a little bit?
This is actually an arrangement, for example, that I have with GFSAN. I do a week-long course with GFSAN every year, and that course I get a minimum fixed fee. So that would be the M, and then we share the upside, but it's variable. In other words, if they get 10 participants, I don't get paid as much. If they fill the room, I get paid more. So that's another model which I think it makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
But I think as a basic model, I think what we have here is workable.
Okay.
So maybe a suggestion about how we might take those two alternatives forward is that maybe perhaps, Greg, at the next board meeting, we could suggest how these might be captured in a document. Maybe it's in addition to this document, or is a separate document, depending on how alternative the model is. So whether it's the first one where GForce is an initiator, or the other one you just spoke about. So if that's all the comments in relation to this particular agenda item, maybe it would just be very useful to sum up really quickly. I know we have the date of the next meeting as well, but just so we had a good discussion in relation to the initiatives. It's great that we have 2 initiatives already ongoing, and we have revenue being generated. What we have agreed is that every initiative will come to the board initially, because all will have a novelty component, but over time, as the novelty diminishes, we will be in a position as a board not to have to vote on every initiative. And in addition, over time, we may identify additional criteria that we could use to determine whether or not an initiative needs to come to the board for a vote. And we're recording this, Sammy, as well, so I'll send the recording, so at least you have a full sight of the entire discussion. If I've missed anything in relation to the ideas from the board, we had agreed, I believe, to the suggestion I made, which was that we could take some time at the next board meeting for a brainstorming session to think about what activities we might need to prioritize from a GForce perspective in the future. And then in relation to the costs, that document was accepted by all. All board members agreed to support this document subject to the changes that we have agreed, and those were in relation to the CV, US dollars, the bulk purchase, the firm fixed amount versus the negotiated amount per day. And then in addition to minor amendments by Greg in relation to the review annually, and then perhaps the need for a policy with respect to organizations or people who are only paid after GForce has received the funding. And then in relation to the final document, e-learning, we have approval for this, but we would, subject to a review clause being added. And then you're going to confirm electronically with Professor Chen if he agrees, as well as, I suppose, making other board members who are not present aware of the decisions that were taken at the board. And then in respect of this, the business, the delivery model of funding, Greg had proposed alternative models, which we can pick up at a future board meeting. I think that probably captures everything. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we had discussed yesterday at the executive board meeting, the next meeting of the board, and if memory serves me correctly, we were putting in 2 meetings in the diary. One was in relation to the executive board meeting.
July 13th.
July 13th. Okay.
Full board meeting, July 27th.
Okay, so could I ask board members who are on the call if they would put that date of July 27th in their diary for the next board meeting, and we'll notify all other board members of that date. And then if members of the executive board who are on this call would also mark that date of July 13th in your diary, and perhaps Sammy, you might then just send around confirmation of those two dates and the Zoom invitations to follow. I think that brings us to an end, a few minutes over time. But I'm going to give Sammy the last word because he was late, but we'll forgive him and we will give him the last word as it was he who started this ball rolling. So over to you, Sammy, for the final word before we finish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thank you for chairing the meeting. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that we circulated, that's myself, Joyce, and VM, 3 letters of disclosure of interest to the consideration of the board pursuant to Article 12.1 of our bylaws. And this is in relation with the implementation of the Codex MENA initiative, where we are involved as experts. Certainly, Joyce and VM were involved in expert group meetings as directed by their jurisdictions, and myself in the delivery of certain aspects of the initiative. And that's why it was important also that we had an agreed upon level of remuneration that is applicable to all initiatives where this could be potentially applied. So.
Thanks, Sammy, for that. My apologies. That was one thing that I had on my list that I didn't quite get to. So thank you for that information. Does anybody have any comments on that or anything else in relation to the meeting before we close? Well, it remains for me to say that I hopefully chaired the meeting to your satisfaction. I met with your expectations and I managed to get you through what ended up being a relatively short, but I think very important discussion that we needed to have in relation to the costs and the business model, etc. So thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the 27th of July, at which point I'm assured that Sammy is going to take back the chair. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All the best, everyone.